When I saw the envelope with my name written in that elegant, looping handwriting, my hands began to shake, not because I recognized it, but because I didn't. It had been years since anyone had written to me by hand. And yet, something about that cursive, careful, old-fashioned, and deliberate, made my chest tighten, as if a ghost had just whispered my name. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind that felt stretched thin by routine. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock above the stove. My husband, Daniel, was still at work, and our daughter, Lily, was in her room finishing homework. I had just made a cup of tea when I found the letter sitting on the edge of our front porch, no postmark, no return address. Just my name, Margaret and Lewis. I turned it over in my hands, hesitant, before sliding my thumb beneath the seal. Inside was a single sheet of cream stationery, and a sentence written in that same delicate script. If you're reading this, Margaret, then the truth can no longer stay buried. No signature. Just that. I must have read the line a dozen times before setting it down on the table, staring at it as if it might rearrange itself into something that made sense. The truth about what? And who would send me something like this, by hand, no less? When Daniel came home that evening, I showed him the letter. He squinted, adjusted his glasses, and frowned. "Looks like someone's idea of a bad joke," he said. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. Before the letter, my ordinary life. To understand why that single sentence rattled me so deeply, you'd have to know what my life looked like before it arrived. I lived in a modest brick house on the edge of town, where the air always smelled faintly of wet grass and the neighbor's barbecue. My days were predictable: morning coffee, my part-time hours at the library, helping Lily with her school projects, and waiting for Daniel's car to pull into the driveway around 6. It wasn't a bad life. Just quiet. Steady. Safe. We'd built it after years of scraping by, after a string of losses I rarely spoke about anymore, the biggest one being my family. See, I hadn't spoken to anyone from my mother's side in over 15 years. Not since the funeral. My Aunt Evelyn was the last link I had to that side of the family, my mother's only sister. But we'd fallen out long before she passed. At least, I thought she had passed. There had been no obituary, no funeral notice. Just silence that stretched on for years, until eventually, silence became the only thing I expected. Evelyn was a complicated woman, sharp-tongued, stubborn, and private to a fault. Growing up, she was this figure of quiet glamour. She never married, never had children, but she carried herself like she had the world's secrets in her back pocket. And in some ways, she did. When my mother died suddenly, a heart attack at 58, Evelyn disappeared. One day she was sitting beside me at the hospital, her perfume like lavender and smoke. The next, she was gone. No call, no goodbye. Just, gone. So when that mysterious letter arrived, my first thought, though I hated admitting it, was of her. That night, I couldn't sleep. The words replayed in my head like a melody I couldn't forget. The truth can no longer stay buried. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was nothing, maybe even a mistake. But as I poured cereal for Lily and packed her lunch, something inside me felt unsettled, like an itch beneath the skin. After dropping her at school, I drove to the library early and sat in my car for a while, just staring out the windshield. Then my phone buzzed, a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered. "Is this Mrs. Margaret Lewis?" a woman's voice asked, calm and professional. "Yes? My name's Claire Donovan. I'm an attorney representing the estate of the late Evelyn Moore." I froze. For a moment, I didn't even breathe. I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Mrs. Moore listed you as her next of kin," the voice continued. "We've been trying to contact you for several weeks. There are some matters regarding her estate that require your attention." My grip on the phone tightened. Evelyn Moore. My aunt. My estranged aunt. I didn't even know she was, the word wouldn't leave my throat. "I understand this must come as a shock," Claire said softly. If you're available, we'd like to schedule a meeting at our office to go over her will. Her will. I hung up a few minutes later, sitting there in silence as cars passed by, the morning sun too bright, too ordinary for a day that suddenly felt anything but. That evening, I told Daniel over dinner. He set down his fork, eyebrows raised. Wait, your Aunt Evelyn? The one you haven't seen since. Since Mom died, I finished for him. He nodded slowly, processing. And she left you something? That's what the lawyer said. I'm supposed to meet her tomorrow. Daniel leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. You think it's connected to that letter? I hadn't thought of it, or maybe I had, but didn't want to admit it. I don't know, I said quietly. But it feels like it. That night, I lay awake listening to the rain against our bedroom window, thinking of my aunt, her sharp perfume, her silver bracelets that clinked when she moved, her voice that could slice through a room with one sentence. She was gone. But somehow, she was reaching for me again, from the other side of all that silence. The next morning, I drove into the city, following the address the attorney had given me. The law firm's office sat on the third floor of a stone building downtown, the kind with brass railings and echoing hallways. Claire Donovan was younger than I expected, with kind eyes and a voice that seemed practiced in delivering difficult news. She invited me to sit, then placed a thin folder on the table between us. Your aunt was a very private woman, she began. She didn't leave much behind, no close relatives except you, and no public records for the past 10 years. But her estate was substantial. I blinked. Substantial? She nodded. Your aunt left behind several assets, including property and a financial account under your name. My name? I asked, stunned. How, why? Claire smiled gently. That's what we're hoping to clarify. Mrs. Moore left a note for you, in her own handwriting. She asked that it be given to you privately. She handed me a sealed envelope, old and yellowed at the edges. The handwriting was unmistakable this time, elegant, looping, deliberate. And beneath the flap, I saw one word that made my heart stop cold. Forgive me. The air in that office felt heavy, not just from the silence, but from the weight of years I'd spent not thinking about her. I sat there, staring at that envelope. 2 words, written by a woman I hadn't seen in more than a decade, and yet they cut straight through the years like glass. Forgive me. I didn't open it right away. My fingers traced the edges, the roughness of old paper, before I finally looked up at Claire. May I? Of course, she said softly. The paper crackled as I unfolded it, and I could almost smell the faint trace of her perfume, lavender and smoke. My dearest Margaret. If you are reading this, I am gone. There are things I never told you, not because I didn't want to, but because I thought silence could protect you. I was wrong. Everything that should have been yours was taken from you, and for that, I can never make amends. But I have left behind something to help you find what was hidden. Go to the house. You'll know what I mean. Forgive me, Evelyn. I stared at the words until they blurred. What house? I whispered. Claire adjusted her glasses, pulling another document from the folder. Your aunt owned a small property about 2 hours north of here, just outside Millbrook. It was the only property listed in her name. From what we can tell, she hadn't lived there for years. A cold, curious thrill ran through me. Millbrook. That was where my mother and Evelyn grew up, the same house my grandparents owned before they passed. I hadn't been there since I was a teenager. You mean that house? I asked. Yes, Claire said. She kept it. All these years. When I got home, Daniel was waiting by the window. So, he asked as soon as I walked in. I told him everything, the letter, the house, the strange message. He listened quietly, hands tucked into his pockets. Are you going to go? He finally asked. I think I have to. He nodded slowly. You want me to come with you? No, I said, shaking my head. I need to see it alone. It surprised me how certain I was. Something about that letter, about her words, felt deeply personal. Like it wasn't just about property or inheritance. It was about history. The road back. The next morning, I packed a small bag, left Lily with Daniel, and started the drive north. The roads grew narrower the farther I went, lined with tall pines and stretches of farmland. By the time I reached Millbrook, it was almost dusk. The town hadn't changed much, the same two-lane main street, the same red brick post office, the same old diner that used to smell of fried onions and coffee. The house sat on the edge of town, past a row of fields gone dry with autumn. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, my breath caught. It looked almost exactly as I remembered, the weathered white siding, the crooked porch swing, the oak tree leaning over the roof. But it was older now, tired, with ivy crawling up the side like green veins. The front door creaked open when I turned the key Claire had given me. The smell hit me first, old wood, dust, and something faintly floral, like potpourri that had long lost its scent. I stepped inside. The living room was dim, lit only by the late afternoon light filtering through lace curtains. Sheets covered the furniture. The wallpaper was yellowed with age. And on the mantel, above the fireplace, hung a photograph I hadn't seen in years. It was my mother, smiling, young, standing beside Evelyn. Their arms linked. I reached out and touched the frame. "You kept this," I whispered. That's when I noticed the envelope tucked behind the photo. It was smaller than the one I'd received at the lawyer's office. Inside was a folded note, and a key. "You'll find what I couldn't say in the cellar. Be careful who you trust." My heart pounded. The cellar. The last time I'd been down there, I was 13. My grandfather had stored jars of peaches and old furniture, and I'd always hated it, the smell of damp earth, the way the air turned cold. I found the door near the kitchen, behind a curtain that looked like it hadn't been moved in years. The lock was stiff, but the key fit perfectly. The stairs groaned beneath my feet as I descended. Dust floated in the beam of my flashlight. At first, there was nothing unusual, just old crates, a rusted bicycle, a trunk. But then I noticed the floorboards near the far wall. They were newer. Different wood. My heart thudded as I crouched down, brushing the dust away. The edge lifted easily when I pried it with the flashlight handle. Beneath it was a small metal box, wrapped in cloth. I pulled it out, coughing from the dust, and sat on the cold step. My fingers trembled as I opened the latch. Inside were stacks of papers, old bank statements, deeds, and letters. And right on top, a photograph that made my stomach twist. It was of my mother. And Evelyn. Standing beside a man I didn't recognize, tall, serious, and holding what looked like a baby. On the back, in Evelyn's handwriting, were 4 words. The truth about Lily. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Lily. My daughter. No, that couldn't be right. It didn't make sense. I flipped through the papers, my hands shaking. There were letters, some from my mother, some from Evelyn, talking about a decision made to protect the child. And beneath them, a single birth certificate, Lily's, only it wasn't. The date, the hospital, none of it matched what I remembered. I stared at the page, the words swimming in front of me. The father's name line was blank. But under Mother, it didn't say Margaret Lewis. It said Evelyn Moore. The flashlight slipped from my hand and clattered against the floor. I sat there in the half-dark, the sound of my own heartbeat filling the silence. "No," I whispered. "No, this can't." But the papers didn't lie. And suddenly, the last 15 years, the secrecy, the way Evelyn vanished, the way my mother never spoke of her again, it all began to make sense in a way that made me sick. Lily wasn't my daughter. At least, not by blood. I sat there on the cold concrete floor for what felt like hours, my hands clutching the papers like they might vanish if I let go. The air in the cellar felt too still, too heavy. Every breath came out shallow. The edges of the birth certificate blurred as tears filled my eyes. I read the name over and over, Mother, Evelyn Moore. Evelyn. My aunt. Not me. The woman who'd vanished after my mother's funeral. The woman I'd resented for years. The woman I'd believed had turned her back on me. But she hadn't disappeared out of cruelty. She'd been hiding something, someone. Lily. When I finally found the strength to stand, my knees ached from the cold. I gathered the box, the letters, the photo, and drove back home in silence, the rain starting to fall in slow, steady sheets against the windshield. Every mile felt longer than the last. How could I tell Daniel? How could I even look at Lily? By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sky had turned black. The porch light was on, spilling a faint yellow glow across the wet pavement. Daniel opened the door before I even reached for my keys. Margaret? You're soaked. I found something, I said, my voice trembling. I found everything. We sat in the living room, the documents spread out across the coffee table. Lily was asleep upstairs, unaware that her whole world, our whole world, was splintering quietly beneath her. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, reading every page with a frown deepening between his brows. After a long silence, he looked up at me. So, you're saying Evelyn is Lily's biological mother? I nodded slowly. That's what this says. He exhaled, leaning back. And your mother, she knew? Yes. They both did. My voice cracked. They both lied to me. Daniel rubbed his face with his hands. But why would they? I shook my head. I don't know. That night, I sat by Lily's door and watched her sleep through the crack, her small body curled under the blanket, her hair spread across the pillow. How do you look at your child, the one you carried in your arms, the one who calls you mom, and suddenly believe she isn't yours? I couldn't. I wouldn't. She was mine. Maybe not by blood, but in every other way that mattered. I had kissed her scraped knees, stayed up all night with her fevers, taught her how to read, how to pray before bed. Whatever Evelyn had done, whatever secret she'd buried, it didn't change the 15 years I'd loved that child. Still, I couldn't shake the question that had begun to gnaw at me, why? Why had Evelyn left Lily with me? And why had she told me no? The next morning, I called Claire, the lawyer. I need to know everything you have on my aunt, I told her. Every document, every note, anything you didn't show me. There was a pause. Mrs. Lewis, I can check the archives, but the file we have is limited. Your aunt was careful. Most of her financial history is sealed. She requested privacy in nearly every document she signed. Can you find out if she had a child? Claire hesitated. We can look, but that might take time. Please, I said softly. I need to know the truth. For the next few days, I functioned on autopilot. I packed lunches, smiled at Lily, made small talk with Daniel, all while the secret sat inside me like a ticking clock. At night, I couldn't sleep. I reread Evelyn's letters, searching for clues between the lines. Then, on the fourth evening, I got another call from Claire. Mrs. Lewis, she said, I found something unusual. There's an older file connected to your aunt's estate, sealed under a different name. What name? Margaret Lewis. My blood ran cold. My name? Yes. But the file predates your marriage. It's dated around the time you were 19. I don't understand. There's an adoption record linked to it. I gripped the phone tighter. Adoption? Yes, she said gently. From 20 years ago. It lists you as the legal guardian of a newborn, under the name Lily Moore. My vision blurred. I was 19 when Evelyn vanished. She must have forged the documents, or convinced someone to help her, and made me the legal mother on paper. She had given me Lily when I was barely old enough to understand what motherhood even meant. And my mother, she must have helped. That night, I went through every old box in the attic. I searched for anything, any trace, that could explain what had happened. In one box, wrapped in tissue paper, I found an old photograph of me at 19, holding a baby in my arms. Lily. Only, I wasn't in a hospital room. I was standing in Aunt Evelyn's living room, the same house I'd just visited. Behind me, my mother's reflection in the window. And Evelyn, her face half hidden in shadow, watching from the corner. There was something in her expression I'd never noticed before. Not pride. Not joy. But sorrow. As if she knew what she was giving up. I sat on the attic floor, that photo trembling in my hands, as the truth settled over me like dust. Evelyn hadn't abandoned me. She'd entrusted me. She'd given me her child, and disappeared to protect us both. But from what? I didn't have to wait long to find out. A few days later, Claire called again. Her tone was different this time, serious, almost cautious. Mrs. Lewis, there's something else. We found sealed correspondence between your aunt and a man named Richard Graham. The name meant nothing to me. Who is he? He was your aunt's business partner. And according to these records, he was also Lily's biological father. I felt the blood drain from my face. Does he know about her? That's the thing, Claire said quietly. He's been trying to locate your aunt for years. And now that she's passed, he's petitioned for access to her estate. He claims he has a right to what she left behind, and possibly, to Lily. For a moment, I couldn't speak. It felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. Lily wasn't just Evelyn's secret. She was someone else's inheritance. And that someone, her father, had just resurfaced. When I ended that call, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely put the phone down. Daniel watched me from across the room, his brow furrowed. What's wrong? I swallowed hard. Evelyn's lawyer found something. There's a man claiming to be Lily's biological father. Daniel froze. What? His name's Richard Graham. He was Evelyn's business partner. He blinked, then leaned forward, voice tightening. And what does he want? He's filed a claim, for her estate. But Claire thinks he might want more than that. Daniel's expression darkened. He can't take Lily. You've raised her. You're her mother. I know, I whispered, my voice breaking. But if what those papers say is true, if she's Evelyn's daughter, and his, I don't know what the law can do. He stood abruptly, pacing the living room. We'll get a lawyer. We'll fight it. But even as he said it, I could see the fear flicker in his eyes, the same fear I felt deep in my bones. That night, I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. I just sat at the kitchen table, Evelyn's letter spread out before me. I kept reading that one line over and over again. Everything that should have been yours was taken from you. What did she mean? Had she been protecting Lily, or me? And from whom? The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Claire. Richard Graham has requested to meet you. He says it concerns your aunt's will, and Lily. My stomach dropped. The meeting. We met at the law office that afternoon. The air outside was thick with the scent of rain, the sky swollen with clouds. When I walked into the conference room, he was already there. Richard Graham. Tall, mid-60s, with silver hair and a sharp jaw. His suit was expensive, his posture confident, but his eyes were weary, like someone who'd spent years living with regret. He stood when I entered. Mrs. Lewis, he said quietly. Or should I say, Margaret? I didn't respond. I just sat, my palms pressed flat against my knees to stop them from trembling. Claire began formally, explaining the situation, Evelyn's estate, the property, the sealed files, but it was clear that wasn't why he was here. I didn't come for money, Richard interrupted softly. I came for the truth. He turned to me. I need to know what happened to my daughter. My throat tightened. Your daughter? I whispered. He nodded. Evelyn told me she was pregnant. But by the time I came back from a business trip overseas, she was gone. Vanished. No forwarding address, no explanation. For years, I searched for her. I even hired private investigators. Nothing. I looked at him, the edges of his words slicing through everything I thought I knew. So you didn't know about Lily? His jaw clenched. No. Not until last month, when Evelyn's death notice finally surfaced, and your name appeared in her estate documents. I recognized it from years ago. She'd mentioned you once, her niece, who was like a daughter to her. I stared down at my hands. My chest felt hollow. So she gave Lily to me, I said quietly. He nodded slowly. Because she trusted you. For a long time, none of us spoke. The rain outside began to fall harder, streaking the windows with thin rivers of silver. Finally, I asked, "What do you want from us, Mr. Graham?" He sighed. "I don't want to take her from you, Mrs. Lewis. But I can't let her grow up never knowing the truth about where she came from. About who her mother really was." His voice softened. "I loved Evelyn. And I loved the daughter I never got to meet. I just want to be a part of her life. If you'll let me." The words hung in the air, heavy with decades of lost time. Claire looked between us carefully. "Mrs. Lewis, this is entirely your decision. Legally, you're still Lily's mother. Evelyn's letter and the adoption records confirm that." But I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was already spinning, picturing Lily's face, her smile, the way she still hugged me goodnight. How could I tell her any of this? How could I explain that the woman she called Mom wasn't her birth mother? And that the stranger sitting across from me was the man who had been searching for her since before she could walk? When I got home, Daniel was waiting again. "How did it go?" I sat down slowly, my body heavy with exhaustion. "He's not what I expected. He doesn't want money. He wants to know her." Daniel frowned. "You can't let that happen, Margaret." "Not yet. She's too young." "I know. But deep down, I also knew that one day, Lily would have questions. And she deserved answers, even if those answers broke my heart." The hidden account. A week later, Claire called again. "Margaret, there's one last thing we've uncovered," she said. "Your aunt left a private bank account in your name, untouched for nearly 16 years. It contains funds meant specifically for Lily's future. And a final letter." I went to the office the next day. The account held far more than I'd ever imagined, hundreds of thousands of dollars, saved quietly over the years. But the money wasn't what made my knees weak. It was the envelope. Evelyn's handwriting again. Inside, just a single page. "My darling girl. If you're reading this, then you found the truth I could never say out loud. I gave Lily to you because you were the only one I trusted to love her the way I couldn't. I was being watched, Margaret. By people who wanted what she represented, control over a business, a fortune, a legacy that never belonged to them. I had to disappear to keep her safe. But I never stopped watching from afar. Every birthday card you received without a name, every bouquet left at your doorstep, that was me. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I was afraid. Now that I'm gone, promise me one thing, tell her the truth, when she's ready. Not before. She deserves to know she was loved, twice over. All my love. Evelyn." By the time I finished reading, tears blurred the ink. She had protected us, both of us, all these years. That night, after Lily went to bed, Daniel and I sat in silence for a long while. Then I said quietly, "One day, she'll ask about her real mother. And when she does, I'll tell her. Not as a secret, but as a gift." Daniel took my hand. "She's yours, Margaret. No letter, no birth certificate can change that." I nodded, though my heart still trembled. "I know. But maybe she deserves to know she was loved by a woman who gave up everything, even her own name, just so she could be safe." A few days later, I wrote to Richard Graham. I told him I wasn't ready for Lily to meet him yet, that she was still too young to understand. He agreed. But at the bottom of his reply, he'd written, "Thank you for raising her. You gave her the life Evelyn wanted her to have. When the time comes, I'll be here, quietly, respectfully, if she ever wants to know me." And for the first time since that first letter arrived, I felt something close to peace. But peace doesn't erase the past. It only gives you enough space to finally face it. A week later, as I went through the last of Evelyn's belongings, I found something I hadn't noticed before, a worn, leather-bound journal tucked inside a box of old photographs. On the first page, in faded ink, she had written, "If anyone ever finds this, know that the story didn't end with me. The truth is deeper than blood, and it lives on in the choices we make." It started quietly, like all storms do. A few whispers. A curious reporter's message. Then suddenly, my life, our lives, weren't private anymore. Someone had leaked Evelyn's will. The story spread like wildfire, late heiress's secret child hidden by family. Our names weren't mentioned at first, but by the second week, the tabloids had dug deeper. They found everything, the adoption papers, the sealed records, even photos of Lily. By then, it was too late to stop it. The front page of one magazine read, "The hidden heiress, mystery child of Evelyn Graham found living under a different name." Daniel threw it onto the table in disgust. "They're vultures. They'll twist everything." I could barely speak. My hands trembled as I stared at the photo, a candid picture of me and Lily walking home from school. She was smiling, clutching her backpack, innocent. And now the world knew she wasn't who she thought she was. That night, I locked myself in the study. The phone wouldn't stop ringing, journalists, lawyers, even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Then came the worst part, a knock on the door. When I opened it, Richard Graham stood there. Rain dripped from his coat, his expression grave. "I told them nothing," he said quietly before I could even speak. "I swear it, Margaret. I'd never expose her." "I believe you," I said softly. "But someone did." He nodded. "Evelyn's estate, it's a shark tank. There are people who stand to gain from this chaos." Over the next few days, reporters followed us everywhere. Lily came home crying after a classmate showed her a headline. "Mom," she sobbed, "why are they saying Aunt Evelyn was my mom?" My heart cracked in two. I wanted to protect her from the truth, just like Evelyn had once protected me, but the world had stolen that choice. So that night, I sat beside her on her bed and told her the story. Every word. Every secret. Every reason. Her small hand never let go of mine. When I finished, she just whispered, "She must have loved me a lot." I nodded through tears. "She did. And so do I." By the next morning, the story had shifted. The world, so quick to judge, began to change its tone. A journalist from the Herald released a follow-up article. Not a scandal, a sacrifice. The hidden story of Evelyn Graham's act of love. Public sympathy turned. Instead of scandal, people saw heartbreak. Instead of greed, they saw legacy. The story went viral. And though I hated the attention, I couldn't deny that, for the first time, Evelyn's truth was no longer buried in silence. A month later, I met Richard again. He looked older, the strain of the headlines had taken its toll, but his eyes held gratitude. "She would have wanted this," he said. "For the truth to come out, but gently. Not in a courtroom, not through lies, through love." I smiled faintly. Maybe this was her final lesson. That truth always finds its way, even when we try to bury it. The letter to Lily. A year later, on Lily's 10th birthday, I gave her a small wooden box. Inside was Evelyn's locket, the one she'd worn in every photograph. On the back, a new engraving. Loved by two mothers. Chosen by both. Lily opened it and smiled softly. Then she looked up and said, "Do you think she can see me?" I pulled her close. I think she never stopped. That night, after Lily went to bed, I walked out onto the porch. The sky was dark, the stars faint, but one shone brighter than the rest. And for the first time, I whispered. Rest now, Aunt Evelyn. She's safe. You kept your promise, and so did I. It's been 3 years since the storm settled. The newspapers found new stories, the whispers faded, and our lives, somehow, stitched themselves back together. Lily's grown taller. She plays piano now, like Evelyn once did. Sometimes, I stand by the door and listen as her small hands find the same melody Evelyn used to play on quiet evenings, the one she called homecoming. Every note carries a memory. Every sound feels like forgiveness. The estate was eventually settled. After the legal battles and the noise, Evelyn's wealth was divided in a way that shocked everyone, not for its size, but for its purpose. She hadn't left it to her brothers or distant cousins. She'd created a foundation. The Graham Home for Girls. A sanctuary for children who'd lost their parents, just like I once did. When the papers were finalized, I found myself holding the final envelope, one Evelyn had left with her lawyer. He said, she asked that this be given to you, once peace returned. Inside was a letter, in that same looping handwriting I knew by heart. My dearest Margaret. If you're reading this, then truth has done what it always does, it's brought light where there was once silence. I hid my mistakes because I thought I was protecting you. But maybe I was protecting myself from shame. Please tell Lily that her mother was not perfect, but she was brave. And please know that you were never just my niece, you were the sister I never had. My fortune was never meant to divide this family. It was meant to heal others. Let love be what you pass down, not silence. Evelyn. I cried quietly that night. Not out of grief, but out of release. Because her words lifted something I hadn't realized I'd been carrying, guilt. I had spent so long trying to protect her memory that I forgot she was human, too. Flawed. Loving. Afraid. Just like me. Months later, Lily and I visited the newly opened foundation. There were flowers everywhere, Evelyn's favorite kind, lavender hydrangeas. The children played in the garden, their laughter echoing off the stone walls that bore her name. Lily looked up at me and whispered, Mom, she did it, didn't she? I nodded, smiling through tears. Yes, sweetheart. She did. As we left, I noticed something carved into the foundation's main gate, a quote Evelyn must have chosen before she died. Love is not hidden in silence. It is proven in what we leave behind. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she asked, Mom, do you think she'd be proud of us? I smiled, brushing her hair from her forehead. She already is. And in the soft glow of her nightlight, I saw something in her eyes, Evelyn's same quiet strength. It reminded me that even when love is buried beneath secrets, it never truly dies. It just waits to be found. I often think about how much we hide in the name of love, and how truth, though painful, is sometimes the greatest gift we can give. If Evelyn taught me anything, it's that families are not bound by what's written in wills or bloodlines, but by the courage to love beyond judgment. So if you're listening to my story tonight, I want to ask you this. Would you keep a secret to protect the one you love? Or tell the truth to set them free? Tell me in the comments, because every story, no matter how hidden, deserves to be heard. And if mine reached your heart tonight, subscribe for more stories like this one. From Voices of Auntie May. Thank you for listening.